In Silicon Valley's elite dining rooms, a brilliant data analyst was about to face her most humiliating dismissal yet. What started as an investor dinner took a shocking turn when her CEO fiancé publicly declared she'd never understand corporate strategy. Maya Roberts wasn't your typical tech partner. For 3 years, she had hidden her Wharton MBA and strategic genius behind a facade of supportive silence. Known for analytical brilliance, her fiancé refused to acknowledge. When Jackson Mitchell dismissed her insights before powerful investors, she made a call to her venture capitalist aunt that would orchestrate the most devastating corporate takeover in Silicon Valley history. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Maya Roberts adjusted the sleeve of her navy blazer one final time, checking her reflection in the mirror of Jackson's Tesla. The restaurant ahead gleamed through the windshield, Le Bernardin San Francisco location, where tech moguls gathered to discuss deals worth more than small countries' GDP. She had spent the afternoon preparing talking points about emerging AI markets, cross-referencing data trends she'd been tracking for months. Her Wharton MBA might be gathering dust in her current role, but her mind remained sharp as ever. "Remember," Jackson said, his voice carrying that particular tone she'd grown to recognize, the one that suggested he was about to say something that would make her stomach clench. "Tonight's about serious business. These investors don't have time for, well, just let me handle the conversation." Maya's fingers tightened around her clutch, the leather warm from her grip. Inside lay 3 pages of market analysis she'd compiled, formatted with the precision that had once earned her top marks in Professor Chen's strategic analysis course. "I understand the stakes, Jackson." "Of course you do." His smile was the kind reserved for reassuring children. "Just follow my lead." The restaurant's interior whispered wealth and influence. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables where conversations shaped the future of technology. Maya recognized faces from TechCrunch articles and Fortune covers. These were the people who decided which startups lived or died, whose innovations would transform industries. Jackson's hand found the small of her back as they approached a table where 3 men in perfectly tailored suits waited. Robert Chen of Apex Ventures, whose fund had backed every major unicorn in the past 5 years. Michael Torres from Goldman's tech division, whose recommendations moved markets, and David Kim, whose family office had quietly funded some of Silicon Valley's most successful companies. "Gentlemen," Jackson's voice carried the easy confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place in such rooms. "I'd like you to meet my fiancée, Maya. She works in data entry at a local firm." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. Data entry. 3 years of analyzing market trends, building predictive models, identifying opportunities that had saved her company millions, reduced to data entry? She felt her smile crystallize into something brittle as the investors nodded politely before turning their attention back to Jackson. "Jackson, the numbers from your Q3 report were impressive," Robert Chen began, diving immediately into business. "But we're seeing some concerning trends in your customer acquisition costs." Her pulse quickened. She'd been tracking similar patterns across the industry, had identified 3 key factors driving the increases. Her fingers moved unconsciously toward her clutch, where her analysis waited. "It's a temporary fluctuation," Jackson replied, his confidence unwavering. "The market's adjusting to new privacy regulations, but we're adapting." Actually, if you look at the correlation between iOS 14.5's privacy changes and user acquisition patterns across freemium models, there's a clear Maya. His interruption came with a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm sure our guests would love to hear about your perspective, but this is a bit above your usual scope." The condescension in his voice made her cheeks burn, but Maya pressed forward, her analytical mind unable to let misinformation stand unchallenged. "The data shows that companies implementing server-side tracking and first-party data strategies are seeing 40% better retention rates. If you're not adjusting your attribution models, honey," the endearment carried a warning. "Why don't you tell them about that interesting article you read in Forbes last week?" Maya's throat felt dry. She could see the polite discomfort in the investors' faces, the way they glanced between her and Jackson. These men who commanded billions in assets were watching her be diminished, and their discomfort wasn't for her, It was for Jackson, having to manage his fiancé's inappropriate interruption. "Sorry," she managed, her voice steady despite the humiliation coursing through her veins. "I should let you get back to business." The conversation flowed around her after that, Jackson expertly steering discussion towards his company's growth metrics and expansion plans. Maya sat silent, her mind cataloging every dismissive glance, every moment when her presence was politely ignored. When Michael Torres asked about implementation challenges, she bit her tongue rather than mention the solutions she had developed for similar problems. When David Kim raised concerns about market saturation, she remained quiet, despite having written a comprehensive analysis of untapped demographic segments just last month. It was Robert Chen's question that finally broke her resolve.
What's your take on the AI implementation strategies we're seeing in the market? He asked Jackson. Seems like everyone's rushing to integrate machine learning without understanding the foundational requirements. Maya's expertise in predictive analytics and machine learning implementation was precisely what Chen was asking about. She'd spent 18 months developing frameworks for exactly these challenges. Her fingers moved toward her clutch again, toward the analysis that could answer Chen's concerns with specific data points and actionable recommendations. Jackson leaned forward, his expression serious. "It's exactly what I've been saying to my team. Most companies are approaching AI like it's a simple software upgrade. They don't understand the complexities of corporate strategy at this level." His eyes found Maya's across the table, and she saw something that made her blood chill. Not just dismissal, but active warning. "Don't embarrass me," his expression said. "Don't overreach." "Maya certainly wouldn't understand the intricacies we're discussing," Jackson continued, his tone carrying false fondness. "Corporate strategy at this level requires years of experience with high-stakes decision-making. It's not the kind of thing you can grasp from reading industry publications." The words landed with surgical precision. Maya felt something fundamental shift inside her chest, like the moment when an overloaded bridge finally reaches its breaking point. The careful composure she'd maintained throughout their relationship, the patient understanding, the supportive smile, the willingness to be background scenery in Jackson's professional world, cracked. She could feel the investor's eyes on her, waiting for her reaction to Jackson's casual dismissal, waiting to see if she'd accept her designated role as the pretty fiancé who didn't understand business, who couldn't possibly contribute meaningfully to conversations that shaped the future of technology. "Excuse me," Maya said, quietly, rising from her chair with practiced grace. "I'll just step outside for some air." Jackson's hand briefly touched her wrist. "Don't be long, we're just getting to the interesting part." Maya nodded, her smile never wavering as she walked through the restaurant. Her heels clicked against marble floors, each step measured and controlled. She could feel Jackson's relief behind her, his ability to continue unimpeded by his fiancé's inappropriate attempts at participation. The cool San Francisco evening hit her face as she stepped onto the sidewalk. The city's lights blurred slightly, and Maya realized her hands were trembling, not from cold, but from the sheer force of the anger she'd been containing. 3 years of watching Jackson's world from the periphery. 3 years of having her insights dismissed, her education diminished, her capabilities reduced to whatever convenient role Jackson needed her to play. Maya pulled out her phone, scrolling through contacts until she found a number she hadn't called in over 2 years. Eleanor Roberts, her father's sister, who'd built a venture capital empire while Maya was still in college. The aunt who'd offered mentorship, connections, opportunities, all of which Maya had politely declined in her determination to build her own path. The phone rang twice before Eleanor's crisp voice answered. "Maya, this is unexpected." "Aunt Eleanor," Maya's voice was steadier than she felt. "I think it's time we had that conversation about family legacy." A pause. Then Eleanor's tone shifted, carrying notes of satisfaction and anticipation. "I wondered when you'd call. I assume this has something to do with that boy you're engaged to." Maya looked back through the restaurant's windows, where Jackson was gesturing animately to his captive audience, where her empty chair served as a reminder of her designated place in his world. "Jackson thinks I don't understand corporate strategy. I think it's time I proved him wrong." Eleanor's laugh was sharp and knowing. "Come to my office tomorrow morning, dear. It's time you learned what real power looks like." Maya ended the call and stood for a moment in the evening air, feeling something new and dangerous unfurling in her chest. Jackson had spent 3 years underestimating her, dismissing her capabilities, reducing her to a supporting role in his narrative of success. He was about to discover that some mistakes couldn't be undone, and some women, when pushed too far, didn't just push back, they took over completely. The restaurant's warm light spilled onto the sidewalk as Maya straightened her shoulders and prepared to return to the table, to smile and nod and play the role of the understanding fiancé one last time. Because tomorrow, the game would change entirely. And Jackson Mitchell had no idea what was coming. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Maya nodded at appropriate moments, offered polite smiles when addressed, and let Jackson's words wash over her. But her mind was elsewhere, already moving toward tomorrow morning and the conversation that would change everything. She found herself studying Jackson with new eyes, noting the way he commanded attention, how he wielded confidence like a weapon, the casual assumption that his voice was the only one worth hearing. When the dinner finally ended, Jackson was ebullient during the drive home. "That went perfectly," he said, one hand on the steering wheel, the other reaching over to squeeze her knee. "Chen's definitely interested in leading the Series C. Torres mentioned some concerns, but nothing we can't handle." "That's wonderful," Maya replied, her voice carrying the same supportive tone she'd perfected over 3 years. "You were perfect tonight," Jackson continued, apparently oblivious to the irony. "Sometimes these dinners can be awkward with partners, but you knew exactly when to step back and let business happen." Maya's fingers tightened around her clutch. "I'm glad I could help." Jackson's penthouse apartment overlooked the city, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the technology empire he'd helped build. As he poured himself a scotch and began reviewing emails on his phone, Maya excused herself to their bedroom. She sat on the edge of their bed, still wearing her navy blazer, and pulled out her phone. Eleanor had sent a single text. 10 a.m. tomorrow, 555 California Street, 47th floor. Come ready to learn. Maya stared at the address. She knew the building, one of San Francisco's most prestigious financial towers, where the city's most powerful venture capital firms maintained their offices. Her aunt's empire, built while Maya had been determinedly forging her own path. Tomorrow she would discover what real power looked like. Tonight she would sleep beside the man who had unknowingly set his own downfall in motion. Jackson's voice drifted from the living room as he took another call, his tone confident and commanding. Maya listened to him discuss quarterly projections and strategic initiatives, the same voice that had dismissed her insights hours earlier. She pulled out her laptop and began typing a resignation letter to her current firm. By tomorrow evening, her life would be completely different. The game was about to begin. Maya stepped off the elevator on the 47th floor, her heels clicking against polished marble. Eleanor Roberts' Capital occupied the entire floor, its glass walls offering panoramic views of the Bay Area's tech corridor. Maya had deliberately avoided this world for years, but now the sight of it sent a thrill through her chest. Eleanor emerged from a conference room, her silver hair pulled back in a precise chignon, her charcoal suit impeccable. At 62, she commanded attention without effort.
the kind of presence that made billion-dollar decisions seem effortless. Maya, Eleanor's embrace was brief but warm. You look tired. It's been a long night. Eleanor's office was a study in understated power. Awards from industry organizations lined one wall, but Maya's attention was drawn to the massive digital display showing real-time portfolio performance, numbers that represented her aunt's influence across dozens of companies. "Before we begin," Eleanor said, settling behind her desk, "I need you to understand something. What I'm about to show you will fundamentally change your relationship with Jackson. Once you see his company's vulnerabilities, there's no going back to ignorant bliss." Maya thought of Jackson's dismissive smile, his casual cruelty disguised as affection. "I'm ready." Eleanor opened a leather portfolio revealing documents that made Maya's breath catch. Jackson's company structure, board composition, shareholder agreements, everything laid out with surgical precision. Mitchell Technologies has grown rapidly, but Jackson made a critical error. In his rush to maintain control, he's created a governance structure with significant vulnerabilities. 3 board seats are up for election in 60 days. Currently, he controls 4 of 7 seats, giving him majority control. Maya studied the organizational chart. But if someone gained control of those 3 seats, they would control the board, and effectively, the company. Eleanor's smile was sharp. Jackson's arrogance led him to underestimate the sophistication of modern corporate governance. He thinks personal charisma and majority shareholding are enough. What would it take? Eleanor slid another document across the desk. These are the current shareholders and their voting patterns. Many are institutional investors who care more about returns than personal loyalty. They can be convinced to support new leadership if presented with a compelling case. Maya felt her analytical mind engaging, seeing patterns and opportunities Jackson had missed. The proxy voting process. Exactly. It's not about owning the most shares, it's about controlling the most votes. And Maya, your family has been building relationships with these institutional investors for decades. 3 hours later, Maya left Eleanor's office with a different understanding of power. Not Jackson's version, loud, demanding, assumptive, but something quieter and infinitely more dangerous. At her cubicle that afternoon, Sarah Williams noticed immediately. "You look different." "Different how?" "Like you know something the rest of us don't."
Maya smiled, opening Jackson's latest company filing on her screen. For the first time in 3 years, she was looking at his business not as a supportive fiancé, but as a strategic adversary. The game had begun. 2 weeks into her double life, Maya had mastered the art of compartmentalization. By day, she maintained her routine, analyzing market data, attending team meetings, smiling when Jackson called her my brilliant little analyst in front of colleagues. By night, she studied shareholder reports and proxy voting histories with the intensity of a general planning a siege. Sarah Williams had become an unwitting accomplice, covering for Maya's extended lunch meetings and mysterious conference calls. "You're plotting something," Sarah observed one afternoon, watching Maya close yet another encrypted file. "And whatever it is, it's making you dangerous." Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. "Tech Forward conference tomorrow. James Anderson keynoting. Perfect opportunity." The Tech Forward conference drew Silicon Valley's elite, and Maya had attended as Jackson's +1 for 3 consecutive years. This time, she went alone, armed with business cards identifying her as a strategic consultant for Eleanor Roberts Capital. James Anderson commanded the main stage with quiet confidence, his presentation on market disruption garnering rapt attention. Maya recognized something in his delivery: respect for his audience's intelligence, the assumption that they could follow complex reasoning. No condescension, no simplified explanations. During the networking break, Maya found herself in conversation with Patricia Cheng, a managing director at Sequoia Capital.
Your analysis of the enterprise software market was fascinating, Patricia said, referencing Maya's impromptu contribution to a panel discussion. I don't think we've met officially. Maya Roberts, Eleanor Roberts Capital. The words felt natural now, her aunt's reputation opening doors Maya hadn't realized existed. Roberts? You're Eleanor's niece. I should have seen the resemblance. Her strategic acumen is legendary. A warm presence appeared at Maya's shoulder. Excuse me, but I couldn't overhearing your comments about market consolidation patterns. Maya turned to find James Anderson extending his hand, his smile genuine and engaged. James Anderson, Nexus Dynamics. Maya Roberts. I shook his hand, noting the firm grip, the direct eye contact. I enjoyed your keynote. Thank you. But I'm more interested in your perspective on the vertical integration strategies you mentioned. Most people see consolidation as purely financial, but you identified operational synergies that were quite insightful. For the next 20 minutes, Maya found herself in the kind of intellectual conversation she'd craved for years. James listened when she spoke, built on Maya's ideas rather than dismissing them, treated her insights as valuable contributions rather than charming interruptions. I'd love to continue this conversation, James said as the afternoon session resumed. Would you be interested in lunch this week? I'm always looking for strategic perspectives, and Eleanor's reputation suggests excellent judgment in her associates. Maya felt a flutter of something she hadn't experienced in years, professional respect that felt genuinely personal. I'd like that. As she watched James return to his seat, Maya caught sight of a familiar figure across the conference hall. David Thompson, Jackson's CTO and best friend, was staring directly at her with an expression of confused recognition. Their eyes met across the crowded room. David's gaze dropped to the business card in Maya's hand, then back to her face. She could see the questions forming. What was Jackson's fiancé doing here alone? Why was she networking with major players in their industry? And most importantly, why did she look so comfortable in a world Jackson had always claimed was beyond her understanding? Maya offered David a small smile and turned away. But she could feel his continued scrutiny. The first crack in her carefully maintained cover had appeared. The game was accelerating. Maya's fingers hovered over her laptop keyboard, the cursor blinking in the proxy filing form. 3 weeks of careful preparation had led to this moment, the formal challenge to Mitchell Technologies' board composition. Eleanor's legal team had crafted the language with surgical precision, each word designed to appear routine while fundamentally threatening Jackson's control. She clicked submit, watching the confirmation screen load. Somewhere in the digital ether, her declaration of war was now official. Her phone buzzed. Jackson's voice was tight with confusion. Maya, something strange is happening at the office. Legal just called about some board challenge from unknown shareholders. Victoria's scrambling to understand the filing. That sounds concerning, Maya replied, her voice steady as she closed her laptop. Are you worried? Not worried exactly, just surprised. I thought I knew all our major shareholders. His tone carried the first note of uncertainty she had heard in years. Victoria thinks it might be a fishing expedition from a competitor. Maya made sympathetic sounds while mentally cataloging the next phase. Patricia Chang from Sequoia had agreed to a meeting next week. 2 pension funds Eleanor contacted were reviewing Mitchell Technologies' governance structure with fresh eyes. The momentum was building. I'm sure Victoria will figure it out, Maya said. She's brilliant with corporate law.
Right, of course. Jackson's confidence was returning, his natural arrogance reasserting itself. Probably nothing serious, just some hedge fund trying to shake the tree. That evening, Maya attended a wine tasting event in Napa, ostensibly a social gathering, actually a carefully orchestrated meeting with 3 institutional investors who collectively controlled 12% of Mitchell Technologies' voting shares. Eleanor had arranged the introduction through mutual connections, presenting Maya as a rising strategic consultant with insights into the tech sector. Jackson Mitchell's company has impressive growth metrics, said Robert Chen, the same investor who'd sat at that humiliating dinner weeks ago. But their governance structure seems antiquated. Maya swirled her wine, choosing her words carefully. Modern boards require diverse perspectives, especially in rapidly evolving markets. Sometimes founders struggle to adapt their leadership style as companies mature. Interesting perspective. Chen's eyes were sharp with calculation. What would optimal governance look like for a company like Mitchell Technologies? Maya outlined her vision, not as Jackson's dismissed fiancé, but as a strategic thinker with deep insights into corporate transformation. She watched recognition dawn in Chen's expression, the subtle shift that said he was seeing her as a serious player rather than background scenery. Meanwhile, across the city, David Thompson was conducting his own investigation. Maya had underestimated his loyalty to Jackson, but also his analytical nature. Years of debugging complex code had taught him to trace problems to their source. He'd started with simple questions. Why had Maya been at Tech Forward alone? Who was she representing? The business card she was holding bore Eleanor Roberts Capital's logo, a connection that raised immediate red flags. David pulled Mitchell Technologies' recent SEC filings, cross-referencing shareholder data with proxy voting patterns. The board challenge seemed random until he noticed the coordination, multiple filings from different entities, all using legal language that suggested common counsel. His phone showed 3 missed calls from Jackson. David stared at his screen, Maya's LinkedIn profile open, showing her recent update, strategic consultant, Eleanor Roberts Capital. The woman Jackson dismissed as working in data entry was apparently consulting for one of Silicon Valley's most powerful venture capital firms. The woman Jackson claimed couldn't understand corporate strategy had somehow positioned herself at the center of a sophisticated board challenge. David closed his laptop, his mind racing. He'd known Maya for 3 years, watched Jackson's casual dismissal of her insights, watched the way she'd gradually withdrawn from offering opinions about the business. Now, he understood. The question was whether to warn Jackson or confront Maya first. Either choice would irrevocably alter relationships he'd valued for years, but doing nothing while his best friend walked blindly into a corporate ambush felt like a betrayal of a different kind. David reached for his phone, Jackson's number highlighted on his screen. His finger hesitated over the call button as he realized the full implications of what Maya had orchestrated. The game had evolved beyond mere board control. This was personal. David chose confrontation over loyalty. Maya was reviewing quarterly reports at her usual coffee shop when he slid into the seat across from her, his expression unreadable. She looked up from her laptop, noting the deliberate way he'd positioned himself, blocking her exit route, his back to the wall. Classic tactical positioning. "Hello, David." Her voice remained steady despite her racing pulse. "This is unexpected." "Is it?" He placed his phone on the table between them, Maya's LinkedIn profile displayed on the screen. Strategic consultant, Eleanor Roberts Capital. Interesting career change for someone who supposedly works in data entry. Maya closed her laptop slowly, buying time to assess the situation. David's loyalty to Jackson was legendary, but he'd also observed his growing discomfort with Jackson's treatment of her over the years. The question was which impulse would win. "I'm assuming you have questions," she said. "Just one, actually." He leaned forward, his voice quiet but intense. "Did Jackson really dismiss your insights about the AI implementation strategy so completely that you decided to destroy his company?" The directness of the question caught Maya off guard. She expected accusations, demands for explanations. Instead, David was asking about motivations, about the pattern of dismissal that had driven her to this point. He told Robert Chen, "I wouldn't understand corporate strategy." At a dinner where I could have answered every question they raised about market trends and implementation challenges. David's expression shifted, recognition flickering in his eyes. "The Series C dinner. You were there when Chen asked about AI frameworks. I wrote a comprehensive analysis on exactly that topic 3 months ago. Jackson's never seen it because, in his mind, I'm incapable of strategic thinking." A long silence stretched between them. David's fingers drummed against the table, his internal conflict visible. Finally, he spoke. I've watched him dismiss your ideas for 3 years, watched you stop offering suggestions, stop engaging with the business discussions. I told myself it was just Jackson being protective of his territory, but, Maya prompted, but I also watched you develop some of the most sophisticated market analysis I've ever seen. Your predictive models for user behavior were brilliant. Jackson never even looked at them. Maya felt something loosen in her chest. Are you going to warn him?
David was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. Jackson's my best friend. But friendship doesn't excuse watching someone be diminished like that. He looked directly at her. What's your endgame, Maya? Board control? Then what? Respect, Maya said simply. The chance to contribute meaningfully to decisions that affect the company's future. To be seen as capable of strategic thinking. And Jackson? Maya's phone buzzed with a text from James Anderson. Dinner tonight? Would love to continue our conversation about market opportunities. David noticed her glance at the screen. Alternative romantic prospects? Someone who treats my insights as valuable rather than charming interruptions. Maya's voice carried 3 years of suppressed frustration. Someone who assumes I'm intelligent rather than being surprised by evidence of it. David nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his expression. Jackson's about to discover that his biggest business threat has been sleeping next to him for 3 years. That depends, Maya said carefully, on whether you're going to tell him. David stood, his decision crystallizing. Jackson's arrogance created the situation. Maybe it's time he faced the consequences. He paused at the coffee shop door. But Maya, when this is over, when you've proven your point, don't become him. Don't let power make you forget what it felt like to be underestimated. Maya watched him leave, then opened James Anderson's text. For the first time in 3 years, she was looking forward to dinner with someone who valued her mind as much as her company. The alliance she'd gained might prove more valuable than the one she'd lost. Victoria Mitchell's discovery came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, buried in the third layer of a complex corporate filing structure. Eleanor Roberts Capital hadn't just backed the proxy challenge, they'd orchestrated it with surgical precision, using shell companies and investment vehicles to mask their involvement until Victoria's exhaustive legal investigation finally traced the connections. But the final document that made Victoria's blood run cold, Maya Roberts, listed as strategic consultant and proxy representative, authorized to vote on behalf of multiple shareholder entities. Victoria stared at her computer screen in their law firm's conference room, empty coffee cups scattered around her like the remnants of a siege. Jackson's fiancé, the woman he'd dismissed as working in data entry, was the architect of the most sophisticated corporate takeover attempt Victoria had seen in her 15-year career. She called Jackson at 6 a.m., her voice tight with exhaustion and disbelief. We need to talk, now. And Jackson, bring Maya. Jackson arrived at Victoria's office 90 minutes later, Maya beside him wearing the same composed expression she'd maintained for weeks. Victoria studied her future sister-in-law with new eyes, seeing calculation where she had previously seen accommodation. Explain this. She slid the documentation across her desk, watching Maya's face for any flicker of surprise. There was none. Jackson scanned the papers, his confusion evident. I don't understand. These are the proxy filings, but his voice stopped abruptly as he reached the signature page. Maya Roberts, strategic consultant, Eleanor Roberts Capital. The silence stretched like a taut wire. Maya sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, watching Jackson process the implications. Victoria had seen this moment in dozens of corporate boardrooms. The instant when someone realized they'd fundamentally misunderstood the game being played. Maya, Jackson's voice was barely controlled. What is this? It's a proxy challenge to your board composition, Maya replied, evenly, filed in accordance with all SEC regulations and corporate governance requirements. Jackson's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally rage. You're trying to take over my company?
I'm trying to bring strategic oversight to a company whose governance structure has become dangerously insular. Maya's tone remained professional, clinical. Your board lacks diversity of thought and experience. The proxy challenge addresses that deficit. Diversity of thought? This is my company. I built it from nothing. With significant venture capital investment, institutional support, and a team of brilliant engineers whose contributions you've consistently minimized, just like you've minimized mine for 3 years. Victoria watched the exchange with growing fascination. This wasn't the accommodating Maya who'd attended family dinners and company events. This was someone else entirely, someone who'd been hiding in plain sight. I gave you everything, Jackson said, his voice rising. I brought you into my world, introduced you to investors, included you in important events. You brought me as decoration, as the pretty fiancé who knew when to smile and when to disappear. You introduced me as working in data entry because acknowledging my actual capabilities might have threatened your position as the smartest person in the room. That's not. Robert Chen asked about AI implementation strategies. I wrote a 40-page analysis on that exact topic. Michael Torres raised concerns about customer acquisition costs. I identified 3 solutions to reduce those costs by 30%. David Kim questioned your market saturation assumptions. I mapped 17 untapped demographic segments with specific penetration strategies. Maya's voice was steady now, clinical in its precision. But none of that mattered because in your mind, I'm incapable of strategic thinking. I wouldn't understand the complexities of corporate strategy.
Jackson's face went pale. Maya, I never meant... You meant exactly what you said. Maya gathered her purse, her movements deliberate. You meant that I was useful as a supportive partner, but irrelevant as a strategic thinker. You meant that 3 years of watching me analyze markets, build predictive models, and identify opportunities somehow escaped your notice because they didn't fit your narrative of who I was supposed to be. Victoria cleared her throat. The proxy vote is scheduled for next Friday. You have 6 days to mount a defense. Jackson turned on his sister. Can we fight this? Legally, they've followed every requirement perfectly. Strategically? Victoria's glance moved to Maya. You're asking me to defend against someone who, apparently, knows your business better than you realize and has the backing of one of Silicon Valley's most powerful venture capital firms. Maya moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Jackson, I never wanted to destroy your company. I wanted you to respect my ability to help strengthen it. She looked back at him, her expression sad rather than triumphant. But respect was apparently too much to ask for. The door closed behind her with a quiet click, leaving Jackson and Victoria in silence. Through the window, they could see Maya walking toward the elevator, her posture straight and confident. Jesus Christ, Jackson whispered. How did I miss this? Victoria studied her brother, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. Because you never looked. The Mitchell Technologies boardroom had never felt smaller. Maya arrived precisely at 9 a.m., carrying a leather portfolio that contained 3 years of suppressed strategic insights and 6 weeks of meticulous preparation. She wore a charcoal suit, Eleanor's suggestion, that projected authority without aggression. Around the conference table, 7 board members and their proxies waited, the air thick with anticipation. Jackson sat at the head of the table, his usual position of power, but Maya could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers drummed against his leather folder. Victoria flanked him as legal counsel, her expression professionally neutral despite the family dynamics at play. Eleanor Roberts entered precisely at 9:05, her presence immediately commanding attention. She nodded to Maya, a small gesture that somehow conveyed decades of preparation for this moment. Board Chairman Richard Hawthorne called the meeting to order, his voice carrying the gravitas of someone who'd presided over countless corporate battles. We're here to consider the proxy challenge filed by various shareholder entities regarding board composition and governance structure.
Maya stood, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. Thank you, Chairman Hawthorne. I'm Maya Roberts, representing multiple shareholders who collectively control 38% of Mitchell Technologies' voting shares. A murmur rippled through the room. 38% was larger than anyone had anticipated. Ms. Roberts, Hawthorne continued, please present your case for the proposed governance changes. Maya activated the wall display, her first slide showing Mitchell Technologies' growth trajectory overlaid with governance metrics. Mitchell Technologies has achieved remarkable growth under Jackson Mitchell's leadership. However, our analysis indicates that the company's governance structure has not evolved to match its scale and complexity. She clicked to the next slide, a comparison of board diversity across tech companies of similar size. Mitchell Technologies ranked in the bottom quartile for both demographic and experiential diversity. Modern corporate governance requires varied perspectives, particularly in rapidly evolving tech markets. The current board composition lacks representation from AI specialists, international market experts, and enterprise software strategists, all critical to the company's next growth phase. Jackson shifted in his seat. Maya could feel his gaze on her, but she maintained focus on the board members whose votes would determine the outcome. Furthermore, Maya continued, advancing to financial projections, our analysis suggests that diversified governance correlates directly with improved strategic decision-making and shareholder returns. Board member Patricia Chen, no relation to the investor Robert Chen, leaned forward. Ms. Roberts, these are compelling arguments for governance evolution, but why this particular proxy challenge? Why not work within existing structures? Maya paused, her gaze briefly meeting Jackson's. Because existing structures have proven resistant to change. Strategic recommendations from qualified sources have been systematically dismissed without consideration. That's not true, Jackson interrupted, his composure cracking. I've always been open to strategic input. Have you? Maya's interruption was swift and definitive. This isn't personal. This is about corporate governance best practices and fiduciary responsibility to shareholders. She advanced to her final slides, detailed strategic recommendations for market expansion, operational efficiency, and technology integration. Each proposal was backed by comprehensive data analysis and implementation timelines. The shareholders I represent don't seek to diminish Jackson Mitchell's contributions, they seek to enhance them through strategic governance that leverages diverse expertise and perspectives.
Eleanor stood to address the board. If I may, Chairman Hawthorne, Eleanor Roberts Capital has a 40-year track record of identifying and developing exceptional strategic talent. Maya Roberts represents exactly the kind of analytical capability and market insight that modern tech companies require at the governance level. Jackson's defense was passionate, but ultimately revealed the problem Maya had identified. He spoke about his vision, his leadership, his company, a monologue that inadvertently demonstrated the insular thinking the proxy challenge aimed to address. When the votes were tallied, the result was decisive. 5 in favor of the governance restructuring, 2 opposed. Maya had secured not just board representation, but effective control of Mitchell Technologies' strategic direction. As board members filed out, exchanging congratulations and business cards, Maya found herself alone with Jackson in the conference room that had witnessed his corporate defeat. "Congratulations," he said quietly, his voice stripped of its usual confidence. "You played this perfectly." Maya studied his face, seeing vulnerability where arrogance had once resided. "Jackson, this doesn't have to be the end of anything. It could be the beginning of something better." He looked up at her, and for the first time in 3 years, she saw him truly seeing her, not as decoration or distraction, but as an equal. "I think," he said slowly, "I have a lot to learn about who you really are." The boardroom battle was over, but the more complex war for mutual respect and understanding was just beginning. 3 weeks into Maya's chairmanship, the dynamics at Mitchell Technologies had shifted in ways both subtle and profound. She arrived at the office each morning to a corner suite that had been hastily converted from a storage room, Jackson's gesture toward acknowledging her new position while maintaining his claim to the executive floor. Maya's first board meeting as chairman focused on the AI implementation strategy she'd developed months earlier. Watching Jackson present her recommendations as collaborative initiatives required a delicate balance of authority and diplomacy. The machine learning framework Maya outlined addresses our scalability concerns, Jackson said, his tone professional but strained. I recommend we proceed with the pilot program. David Thompson nodded from across the conference table. The technical specifications are solid. Timeline seems aggressive, but achievable. Maya observed the careful way Jackson now included her in strategic discussions, the measured respect that felt practiced rather than natural. Victory, she was learning, carried its own complications. Her phone buzzed with a text from James Anderson. "Dinner tonight? Have a proposition that might interest you." Over the past month, James had become a constant presence, intellectually stimulating, romantically attentive, and refreshingly uncomplicated. He saw her capabilities without needing to be convinced of them, treated her authority as natural rather than surprising. "Maya," Jackson appeared in her office doorway holding a quarterly report, "do you have a moment to review the Q4 projections?" The reversal still felt surreal. Jackson Mitchell asking for her time, her input, her approval. She gestured to the chair across from her desk, noting how he sat forward slightly, the posture of someone seeking approval rather than granting it. "The numbers look strong," Maya said, reviewing his analysis, "but I'm concerned about the customer acquisition costs in the enterprise segment." Jackson's jaw tightened slightly. "We've made adjustments to the pricing model." "I'm not questioning your judgment," Maya interrupted gently. "I'm asking for your analysis of the underlying trends." The distinction mattered. Maya was learning to wield authority without wielding it as a weapon, to demand respect without demanding submission. The lessons from David's warning echoed in her mind. Don't become what you fought against. Jackson's analysis was thorough, his insights valuable, despite his obvious discomfort with the new dynamic. Maya found herself genuinely impressed by his strategic thinking when it wasn't clouded by arrogance or dismissiveness. "Good work," she said simply. "Let's implement the pricing adjustments and reassess in 30 days. Jackson nodded, then hesitated at her office door. "Maya, I know this is awkward. The power shift, I mean, I'm trying to—" "Jackson." Maya's voice was firm but not unkind. "Professional respect doesn't require personal penance. We're building something new here, not relitigating the past." He studied her face, searching for signs of vindictiveness or cruelty. Finding none seemed to unsettle him more than finding them would have. That evening, Maya met James at a restaurant overlooking the bay, where he outlined his proposal for a strategic partnership between their companies. But she found herself distracted, thinking about Jackson's vulnerability, his genuine attempts to adapt to their new dynamic. "You're thinking about him," James observed, his tone understanding rather than jealous. "I'm thinking about what comes next," Maya replied honestly. "I've proven my point, I've gained the respect I wanted, but now what?" James reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "Now you decide what kind of leader you want to be, and what kind of life you want to build." Maya looked out at the city lights, each one representing someone making choices about power, love, and respect. She'd won her war, but victory had revealed new questions she'd never thought to ask. 6 months after the boardroom victory, Maya stood in her penthouse office, the one Jackson had finally vacated without fanfare, watching the sun set over Silicon Valley. Mitchell Technology stock had risen 23% under her strategic guidance, validating every decision that had led to this moment.
A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Jackson entered carrying 2 cups of coffee, a gesture that had become routine during their weekly strategy sessions. "The Q2 numbers are final," he said, setting her cup on the desk with careful precision. "Revenue up 18%, customer acquisition costs down 12%. Maya nodded, accepting the coffee and the implicit peace offering it represented. Their working relationship had evolved into something neither had expected. Genuine collaboration built on mutual respect and complementary strengths. Jackson, she said carefully, we need to talk about the partnership proposal from James. Jackson's expression flickered, not with the possessive anger she might have expected months ago, but with something more complex. Understanding, perhaps. Even acceptance. He's offering you everything I never did, Jackson said quietly. Professional respect from day one. A partnership built on equality. Maya studied his face, seeing the man she'd fallen in love with 3 years ago beneath the layers of humility that defeat had taught him. He is, but that doesn't mean... Maya. Jackson set down his coffee, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. I've spent 6 months learning to see you as you actually are, not as I needed you to be. And what I see is someone who deserves better than I was capable of giving. The admission hung between them, honest and painful and necessary. I was thinking, Jackson continued, about that dinner with the investors, the night everything changed. I keep replaying it, wondering how different things might have been if I just listened. Maya felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness, exactly, but a recognition that growth sometimes required the courage to admit fundamental failure. We can't rewrite the past, she said softly. No, but maybe we can write a different future. Maya's phone buzzed with James' daily text, a reminder of the choice waiting for her. Respect given freely versus respect hard-won. Love without struggle versus love transformed by it. She looked at Jackson, really looked at him, and saw not the arrogant CEO who had dismissed her capabilities, but a man who had learned to value what he'd nearly lost. What are you suggesting? She asked. That we start over, not as the people we were, but as the people we've become. Jackson's smile was tentative but genuine. Maya Roberts, brilliant strategist and board chairman, would you like to have dinner? As equals this time. Maya felt tears she hadn't expected gathering in her eyes. The victory she'd sought had been professional respect. What she'd found was something rarer, the possibility of love rebuilt on a foundation of genuine understanding. I'd like that, she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. But Jackson, if you ever dismiss my strategic insights again, I'll be reporting to you, he finished, his grin carrying echoes of the charm that had first attracted her, tempered now with hard-earned wisdom. Outside, Silicon Valley hummed with ambition and possibility. Inside, two people who had nearly destroyed each other were choosing to build something new.